Good day, I'm Kenneth Jimenez, and together with my groupmates, we will discuss government intervention and market failures. So, the topic contents are first, public goods and externalities. Second, role of government in correcting market failures. Third is the cost-benefit analysis of government intervention. So, first, let's talk about public goods. So, it is a commodity or service that is provided without profit to all members of society, either by the government or a private individual or organization. So, sinasabi dito na ito daw po yung mga bagay o serbisyo na ibinibigay sa atin ng pamahalaan o kahit ng pribadong individual o organisasyon na kahit wala silang kikitain ay pinoprovide nila sa atin upang mag-benefit tayo. So, mababasa natin dyan yung word na non-excludable and non-rivalrous. So, non-excludability. So, pag sabi natin non-excludability, kahit na hindi yan binayaran ng tao, so hindi mo siya po pwedeng pagbawalan na gamitin to. Lahat tayo pwede gumamit ng mga bagay o serbisyo na pinrovide sa atin ng ating government. So next is the non-rivalrous consumption. So pag sinabi naman nating non-rivalrous consumption, sinasabi dito na kahit gamitin tong paulit-ulit ay hindi siya mauubos. So, magagamit pa rin siya ng ibang tao. So, alamin muna natin yung pagkakaiba ng private goods sa public goods. So, si private goods, ito yung pwede mong kontrolin at pwede mong angkinin. While si public goods naman, hindi mo siya pwedeng angkinin, pero magagamit mo siya at magagamit ng lahat ng tao. Magbe-benefit tayong lahat. So, ano nga ba yung mga example? So, first is the national defense. So, hindi mo siya pwedeng angkinin, pero lahat tayo ay kayang protektahan nito at ipagtanggol. So, next is the street lighting. So, syempre, pinrovide sa atin to para makita natin sa gabi yung kalsada. So, hindi mo pwedeng pagbawalan yung isang kotse na gumamit na ito kasi pinrovide to sa atin lahat. So, si clean air. So, syempre, nandito si clean air. Ito yung mga sa tingin ko is yung mga pinapatupad ng mga Clean Air Act. So, nagbe-benefit tayong lahat dito sa law na to para ma-inhale natin yung malinis na hangin. So, next is the public parks. So, tinayo to ng mga government para relax, enjoy. So, kahit gamitin to ng lahat, hindi siya mauubos, no? Pwedeng gamitin ng lahat ng tao. Lahat tayo ay magbe-benefit. So, ano nga ba yung mga challenges of public goods? So, isa na rito si free rider problem. So, dahil nga ang public goods ay non-excludability, so hindi mo pwedeng pagbawalan ang kahit na sino man na gumamit ito kasi pwede mo tong gamitin kahit na hindi mo bayaran at available to sa lahat. So, yun yung nagiging isang challenges kasi hindi mo sila pwedeng pagbawalan kahit na hindi nila parang binayaran yon, no? Magagamit nila. So next is the market failure. So bakit nga ba nagkakaroon ng market failure? Kasi nga kukonti lang yung mga private firms na nag-i-invest dito sa mga ganitong project ng government kasi nga wala namang kasing kikitain o walang profit dito. So, once na na-provide na to, lahat makakagamit kahit hindi bayaran ng tao. So, next one is the externalities. So, pag sinabi nating externalities, pumapasok dito yung word na externality kapag yung decision ng isang tao o ng isang kumpanya na gumawa ng isang public good. Pero, nakaka-epekto ito sa mga taong hindi directly involved sa decision na yon, or yung mga tinatawag nating third party o kaya yung mga biktima ng pangyayari. So, makikita natin dyan na pwede siyang maging positive or negative. Kasi nga, gaya nga ng sabi na in any economy, so goods and service can be produced and consumed in ways that sometimes do not lead to the best outcome for everyone. So, meron pa rin siyang magiging negative impact. So, the types of externalities, meron tayong positive externalities. So, this is the actions that benefit others. So, makikita natin example na vaccinations or education. So, nakakaligha to ng positive externalities. So next is the negative externalities. So this is the actions that harm others, such as pollution or traffic congestion. So nakagawa siya ng negative externalities. So para mas maintindihan natin, so here's an example. So a new car manufacturing plant daw po is built to provide over 5,000 new jobs for people in the local area. So this newfound wealth in the area creates huge demand for local businesses who enjoy high profits, which can be considered as positive externality. However, yung factory daw po na ito is nag-emit siya ng large amount of toxic gases. So, the increased pollution results in the local area suffering from a permanent haze, which can be considered as negative externality.
So now, let's talk about the role of government in correcting market failures. First is regulation and legislation, which governments enforce regulations and laws to correct market failures, ensuring fair competition, consumer protection, and environmental sustainability. So markets, when left unregulated, can sometimes lead to monopolies, unsafe products, environmental degradation, or labor exploitation. So by enforcing these regulations or policies by the government, they ensures that businesses operate ethically and efficiently while minimizing negative impacts on society. So, example nato is yung Consumer Protection Law, wherein yung FDA or the Food and Drug Administration regulates the safety of pharmaceuticals and food products, which requires companies to label food and products with ingredients and also yung mga expiration date na nakikita natin sa mga product to protect yung consumers. Next is the provision of public goods. Since private companies do not have enough incentives to provide them and they cannot charge consumers effectively, so without government intervention, these goods would be underproduced or not provided at all, so leading us to a market failure, meaning in simple terms, it refers to the government's role in supplying goods and services that the free market may underproduce or fail to provide efficiently. So there are two characteristics, the non-excludability and the non-rivalry. Yung non-excludability, it refers to the two things that cannot be prevented from using good even if they do not pay for it. For example, as I said kanina, yung street lighting and national defense. In non-rivalry, it is the one person's use the goods does not reduce its availability for others. For example, yung mga meron tayo is like yung mga public parks, clean air. That's the example of non-rivalry. So next is the redistribution of income. So income inequality can lead to economic instability and social unrest. So governments use taxation and welfare programs to redistribute wealth, supporting lower income individuals through pensions like unemployment benefits and public assistance programs. So through redistribution, governments aim to reduce poverty, improve living standards, and maintain economic balance by ensuring that wealth is more evenly distributed across society. So one example is the progressive taxation, which is higher income individuals pay a largest percentage of their income in taxes than lower income individuals. Meaning, kapag mas mataas yung sahod mo, mas mataas yung tax na babayaran mo. For example, mas malaki yung business mo. So yung business na yon, yung corporation or organization, mas nagbabayad sila ng mas malaking tax kaysa dun sa mga lower income businesses. So in conclusion, government intervention in markets is very necessary to correct inefficiencies and to protect its citizens and ensure fair economic outcomes, while regulation and legislation controls the market abuses and externalities. The provision of public goods ensures that the essential services are available to all. So additionally, yung distribution of income helps create a more balanced and equitable society. And though mayroon mga excessive government intervention that can lead to inefficiencies, so yung balance between free markets and regulation is very essential for economic growth and stability of our country.
Good day everyone, I'm Janine Malabanan. I will report the continuation of the role of the government correcting marketing error. So, government intervened to establish the economy by managing inflation, unemployment, and economic growth. This is mainly achieved through monetary policy and fiscal policy. So, monetary policy is handled by central banks like the Federal Reserve or Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. They adjust interest rates and control the money supply to manage inflation and encourage investment. On the other hand, fiscal policy involves the use of government taxation and spending to influence economic activity. So next, clear and well-defined property rights are essential because they give individual and business the legal authority to use, transfer, or benefit from their resources. So without these, resources might be misused or overexploited. An example of this is the land ownership law, where the government create land titling system. This system help prevent disputes and promote the productive use of the land. So, another important role is promoting research and development or R&D. So, private companies often avoid investing in R&D due to high cost and risk. To address this, government offers support through government grants for university and research institutions and tax incentive for companies that invest in new technologies. Example, in real world in COVID-19 vaccine development, when government provide funding for pharmacy company to speed up vaccine production. So lastly, the government also take part in managing natural monopolies. Some industry like utilities tend to become monopolies because of high infrastructure costs. So instead of allowing these monopolies to overcharge customers, the government step up in to regulate or operate them. So a prime example is electricity regulation. So in the Philippines, the Energy Regulation Commission or ERC control electricity price to ensure fair pricing and protect consumer. So conclude, through this function, market establish property right enforcement, promoting R&D and managing monopolies. The government ensure a stable, fair, and progressive economy.
So the next topic is the cost-benefit analysis of government interventions. So first, ano nga ba ang government interventions? Ito ang mga actions na ginagawa ng government para ma-impluwensya ng economy, markets, or mga specific industries. Ginagawa ito para ayusin ang mga market failures, mapanatili ang economic stability, o para ma-achieve ang mga social goals ng bansa. Examples is pagpapataw ng mga taxes, pagbibigay ng subsidiaries or tulong pinansyal, pagtatakda ng presyo sa mga bilihin, regulations, minimum wage laws, mga public projects like infrastructure, at pati na rin ang mga bailouts kapag nalulugi ang mga malalaking kumpanya. Ginagawa ito ng government para mapigilan ang monopoly, suportahan ang mahihinang sektor ng ekonomiya, o labanan ang lumalalang kahirapan. Ngayon naman, let's define the cost-benefit analysis or CBA. Ang CBA ay isang paraan para i-evaluate kung sulit ba ang isang policy or project. Sinusukat nito ang kabuoang epekto ng isang policy, kung gaano ba ito kapakinabang or gaano ba kalaki ang gastos nito at kung anong epekto nito sa buong lipunan. Ginagamit ito para malaman kung ang benefits ba ay mas mataas kaysa sa cost, para matanong kung tinatanong ba nito kung sulit ba ang isang project. Pero may limitations din ang CBA. Dahil nakafocus ito sa monetary values, minsan hindi nito nasasama ang mga non-monetary effects tulad ng environmental impact, moral issues, at equality. Kaya kahit useful ang CBA, hindi ito dapat ang basehan lang sa pag-create ng decision. Usually, may 10 steps ang CBA para i-convert ang mga effects into money terms. Pero dapat sinasama ito sa iba pang analysis tools para mas maging comprehensive ang evaluations. So the first steps is explain the purpose of CBA. Dito, tinutukoy kung bakit ginagawa ang analysis. Ano ba ang problema? Ano ba yung gustong solusyonan ng gobyerno? So halimbawa is, ang gustong solusyonan ng gobyerno is yung traffic. So, ginagawa ito upang maging malinaw ang layunin, kasi kung hindi malinaw yung layunin, magiging magulo yung buong analysis. Kailangan meron silang clear goal para malaman kung success ba ang policy later on. Second, specify the set of alternative policies. Dito, inilista ang iba't ibang options or policies na pwedeng i-consider bilang solusyon dun sa traffic. So, halimbawa, the first option is magtayo ng bagong kalsada. Second is palawakin ng MRT system. Third is magpatupad ng stricter coding. So, ginagawa ito para meron tayong paghahambingan. Hindi natin malalaman kung ano ang best option kung wala tayong pagkukumparahan between options. Third is specify standing, decide whose costs and benefits count. Dito, sino-sino ba kasali sa analysis? Kaninong perspective ba ang bibilangin? Halimbawa is yung mga commuters, car owners, business owners, environmental groups, or local residents. Hindi lahat ng epekto ay pantay-pantay para sa lahat. Dapat malinaw kung sino ang mga stakeholders or maapektuhan para fair at relevant ang resulta ng analysis. Fourth, identify the impact categories, catalog them, and select metrics that will be used. Dito tutukuyin ang mga epekto ng bawat option, both good and bad, then pipiliin kung paano susukatin ang mga ito. Halimbawa, magiging epekto kapag nagkaroon ng construction for traffic is magkakaroon ng time save. Pwede natin siyang masukat in minutes. Cost of construction, masusukat natin siya in peso. Emission reduced or pollution, mababawasan yung pollution, masusukat natin siya in tons of carbohydrates. And job creation is masusukat natin siya in number of jobs. Ginagawa ito para hindi natin makalimutang i-consider ang lahat ng importanteng factors. Hindi lang gastos, kundi pati epekto sa tao at kalikasan. Fifth, predict the impacts of the policies quantitatively. Estimate kung gaano kalaki ang epekto ng bawat policy option. So, ilang commuters ba ang matutulungan? Ilang oras ang matitipid sa bawat biyahe kada araw? Ilang taon bago magkaroon ng resulta? Because numbers help us visualize the size of benefits and costs. Mas madali ma-analyze kung may actual data tayo. Number 6, revise all impacts in monetary terms. Lahat ng epekto, kahit hindi pera, ay kailangan lagyan ng halaga sa pera para maikumpara natin sila. So, for example, doon sa time save, ito-times natin siya sa wage rate at makukuha natin yung productivity in peso value. Doon naman sa less pollution, makakukuha natin yung healthcare savings in peso din and dun sa convenience. Next, since pera ang common unit, kapag lahat ng bagay may equivalent sa peso value, mas madali natin silang i-add, i-compare, at i-balance. 7. Discount benefits and cost to obtain present values. Dito, i-adjust natin ang future benefits and costs para malaman ang present value nito ngayon. Halimbawa, 100M na benefit 10 years from now is only worth 60 million today. Because of inflation and time value of money, mas mahalaga ang 100 ngayon kesa 100 bukas. Kaya kailangan ma-convert lahat sa today's value for fairness. 8. Calculate the net present value or NPV. Kukunin natin ang total benefits minus total cost after discounting it. This is called the net present value. NPV or the net present value tells us kung sulit ba ang project. Kapag ang nakuha mo is positive NPV, it means the project is good investment. If nakuha mo naman is negative NPV, it means the project is not worth it. 9. Perform a sensitivity analysis. This tests different what-if scenarios to check if the decision is still valid kahit may changes sa assumptions. Halimbawa, paano kung tumaas ang construction cost? Paano kung kaunti lang pala ang commuters na gagamit ng MRT? Dito, walang estimate na perfect. Sensitivity analysis help us see kung matatag ba ang conclusion kahit may mga changes. And last step is make a policy recommendation. After lahat ng calculations and analysis, pumili na ng pinaka-best na option dun sa solution. So, for example, isa sa option is merong highest NPV, meron siyang consistent benefits, and it passes all sensitivity tests. It means ayun yung i-recommend na option dun sa problema na traffic. This is the goal of the whole process. Mag-recommend ng solution na sulit, makatwiran, at epektibo. Ang CBA ay isang sistema or step-by-step process na tumutulong sa mga policymakers na makita kung ginagamit ba ng tama ng gobyerno ang pera, nakakatulong ba talaga ang project sa kabuuang kapakanan ng lipunan. Hindi sapat na magandang ideya lang ang isang project, dapat may economic sense din ito. So, meron tayong tatlong requirements para masabing economically viable ang project. A project is economically viable if the economic benefits of the project exceeds its economic cost when analyzed for society as whole. First, may economic surplus siya. Ibig sabihin, mas malaki ang kabuuang benepisyo kaysa sa opportunity cost o halaga ng mga bagay na ginamit para sa project. Example, kung 100M ang ginastos sa project at 150M ang total benefit sa society, it means merong 50 million surplus. It means that the project is sulit. Second, mas efficient siya kaysa sa ibang options. Dapat ito ang pinaka-cost-effective na paraan para makamit ang goal. Kung may tatlong paraan para bawasan ang traffic, dapat piliin yung pinakamurang option na may pareho o mas magandang epekto. And thus, may sapat na pondo at tamang sistema para magpatuloy ang project. Kahit okay ang analysis, kung walang budget pang maintain o kulang ang sistema, babagsak pa rin ang project. Example, the MRT expansion na walang maintenance plan, it means masisira siya agad. So, kailangan sustainable ang operation. Ang CBA ay decision-making tool ng gobyerno. Dahil pera ng taong bayan ang ginagamit, dapat lang na ang gobyerno ay mag-invest lang sa projects na may pakinabang sa buong lipunan. Even if ang isang project ay hindi kumikita financially, kung malaki ang benepisyo nito sa tao like may malinis na hangin, mas maikling biyahe, o mas magandang access education, pwedeng i-push ito ng gobyerno basta may resources at efficient ang implementation.
Now let's move on to the pros and cons of cost-benefit analysis. First is the pros. First pro is that cost-benefit analysis is a data-driven analysis. CBA relies on quantifiable data, which provides a clear and objective basis for decision-making. This helps to eliminate biases and ensures decisions are grounded in facts rather than assumptions. Second is that it avoids considering too many options at once. By focusing on the most relevant alternatives, CBA prevents overwhelming decision-makers with too many options or choices. This approach allows for clear comparison between the available options. Third is its deeper, potentially more reliable findings. A thorough analysis of both costs and benefits leads to insights that are more comprehensive and grounded in real data. This increases the likelihood that the findings will be accurate and useful for making informed decisions. Fourth is its insight to financial and non-financial outcomes. CBA analysis, or cost-benefit analysis rather, evaluates both monetary and intangible factors, providing a well-rounded perspective on the potential impact of a decision. This ensures that all relevant outcomes, including customer satisfaction and long-term benefits, are taken into account. Next is the cons. First is that it may be unnecessary for smaller projects. For smaller scale projects with limited scope or impact, a cost-benefit analysis might be overly complex or unnecessary. In such case, simpler decision-making methods may be enough without the need for extensive analysis. Second is that it requires capital and resources. Conducting a CBA can be resource-intensive, involving time, money, and effort to gather accurate data. This can be a significant drawback for organizations with limited budgets or resources. Third is that it relies heavily on forecasted figures. This analysis depends on future projections, which are often uncertain and can lead to inaccurate conclusions if the assumptions are incorrect. This reliance on forecasts can introduce a high degree of risk in decision-making. Fourth is that its over or underestimating can make findings inaccurate. Misjudging the costs or benefits can lead to flawed decisions or analysis, resulting in poor choices. Next is the four main elements of CBA, or cost-benefit analysis. The first one is the policy rationale. This element defines the underlying reason for the project or decision, outlining the objectives that the analysis seeks to achieve. It establishes the purpose and context of the analysis, ensuring that decision-making process aligns with broader goals and policies. Second is the explicit assumptions. CBA relies on specific assumptions about future costs, benefits, and risks. These assumptions must be clearly stated and justified, so as they serve as the foundation for the analysis and influence the accuracy of the results. Third is the evaluation of alternatives. This step involves comparing different options or courses of actions to determine which one offers the best results. This analysis, or the analysis, evaluates each alternative based on its costs and benefits, helping decision makers choose the most effective solution. Fourth is verification. This ensures the accuracy and reliability of the data used in the cost-benefit analysis. This involves checking the assumptions, data, sources, and methodology to confirm that the findings are valid and robust. Next category is the challenges to cost-benefit analysis. First one is that it's apolitical. CBA is meant to be neutral and objective, but political factors can influence the outcomes. Second is the level of effectiveness. It can be difficult to accurately measure the effectiveness of a policy or decision, especially for intangible benefits like social well-being or environmental impact. Third is the economic bias. Cost-benefit analysis often places heavy emphasis on monetary values, which may overlook social, environmental, or ethical considerations. Fourth one, and the last one, is the methodological limitations. There are inherent limitations in the methods used for the CBA, or cost-benefit analysis, such as difficulties in quantifying certain benefits or accurately forecasting future outcomes. Moving on, next is the presentation of a cost-benefit analysis of a government-supported management training program for medium-sized firms in Ghana. This evaluation can help us understand whether the intervention provides more benefits than the costs involved. So, for the cost breakdown, let's break down the total cost per firm, which amounts to 6,876 in their currency. Training costs, most of the cost is 4,355 or around 21,113 here, which goes to the training itself, including the instructor fees the materials, and the venue rental. Next is the post-training investment, which is 2,379 or about 11,500 a year, which covers additional business investments after the training, such as purchasing equipment or hiring new staff. And 142 in their currency, or around 686 pesos a year, which is representing 17.5 days after days spent attending the training, which is considered the time cost for the entrepreneurs who attended the training. Together, this reflects the total investment needed per every participating firm. Next is the benefits of the training. After 1 year, the expected benefit is a significant increase in profits, estimated at 70,985 or roughly 344,000 pesos a year. This includes the gains in productivity, competitiveness, and market reach. The benefit cost ratio is 9.6, which means that for every 1 peso spent, there is a firm could expect to gain around 9.6 pesos in return, which is a very strong return on investment. However, we need to keep in mind a few limitations. This study is based on a relatively small sample of metalwork firms in Ghana, so results may vary across industries. Also, the profits are only measured for the first year. If benefits continue, the impact would be even greater. And finally, the actual outcomes depend on whether firms can properly apply what they learned during the training. So to conclude, this program shows a positive return investment or positive ROI with a BCR of 9.6. Even with the cost, the economic benefit is high. Still, more research is needed for broader applications, especially across industries and over longer time frame.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great time.